there's a strong view here that supply side is not enough. I think it comes out quite clearly, and this is, of course, what I'm also saying. We need to look at the demand side, but clearly solutions will involve an integrated approach. We need to look at education skills, look at the safety issues, infrastructure, the laws and regulations, etc. But I do agree that, and it's just not unique to India, but see around the world, that there's been much less attention given to the demand side policies and their contribution to employment in general, but in particular when we're looking at gender aspects. Well, we don't have time to go into all the debates around macroeconomic policy. Particularly since the global financial crisis, we've had a lot of debates around the world about the role of monetary policy, looking at real targets, etc. But I think on fiscal policy, it's worth pausing for a moment. Well, we heard Devaki Jain's view of gender budgeting. I won't go into gender budgeting. I'm not an expert at all on gender budgeting. There are many people here in this room. But I would just refer to the need to look at how budgets are allocated, particularly fiscal space is created to increase government expenditure in certain sectors. Last year in 2018, the ILO brought out a report on the care economy, which put a lot of emphasis on the importance of investment in the care sectors. In that report, there was an estimate suggesting that if expenditure on the care sectors was doubled by 2030, there'll be a creation of 475 million new jobs by 2030. I mean, if you look at this region, expenditure on care services, early childhood care, long-term care, elderly care, etc., is very low. It's well below 1% of GDP. It's about 0.2% of GDP. And so clearly investing in the care sector has a number of benefits. I mean, one is, of course, to address the constraints that occur from unpaid care. I mean, ILO's own estimates, you mentioned the OECD's estimates, Ashwini, but ILO's own estimates show that men spend less than, at the very lowest end in terms of the number of, if you look at the time use surveys, in terms of unpaid care work, it's less than 10% of total unpaid care work in the household. It's at the lowest end with Pakistan and other countries. It's so, investing in the care sectors will be very important in terms of alleviating that constraint, but at the same time in creating the jobs I was referring to. But let me just also add one twist. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think what is absolutely critical is to look at industrial and sectoral policies with this gender lens. We all know the problems of structural transformation, not going through the same processes as we saw in the Industrial Revolution or in East Asia. In this part of the world as well, manufacturing hasn't emerged as the driver to the same extent. There's also issues about the aspirations and whether people actually want these types of jobs. But what is very important in the design of industrial and sectoral policies is to look at implications for women, how to increase the creation of jobs that women will be able to access. Of course, it's related to all those issues we're talking about, access, infrastructure, safety, but really need to now look much more carefully at the design and implementation of these policies. And, this involves looking at the impact of investment. There's methodologies to do that. We should be spending much more time thinking about how investment, both public and private investment, is translating to job creation with the gender implications. And there's no magic solution on this, given the complexity that we face in this world of structural transformation today. And one lesson I have seen over the years, looking at which countries are doing better, is it's the ones who monitor and learn from that process is perhaps the most important lesson. In a sense, it's not a one-shot exercise. Well, we want labor-intensive manufacturing. Well, it's not going to apply to all of India, just because India is not homogeneous. But we also need to monitor the process and learn from what is working, and also admitting when certain sectoral policies are failing. That becomes one of the hardest things for governments is actually to admit a policy has failed. And then to move on and looking at other sectors with that gender lens to look at its implications for creation of jobs for women. And clearly in India, this has to be done, the sectoral part has to be done more at the state level. Obviously, a lot of the macro policy is determined at the national level. There's implications for the fiscal space from the national. But in terms of looking at those sectors and their ability to create jobs for women, this really has to become a priority at the state level.